Hello, my name is Elkrief, and in this video I'm going to talk about what makes people happy. And I'll tell you right now, it's not what most people think it is. So most people tend to think that happiness is created by activities or by situations, events, that type of thing. So the way to see whether that's true or not is by investigating it a little bit. So does an activity make us happy? Well, so let's say you like a certain sport like soccer or dancing or something like that. When you do it, it seems to make you happy, right? But stop for a second. Are you sometimes unhappy while doing that activity? If you're worrying about the future or insecure about yourself or frustrated with what's going on? Yes, of course you can be unhappy while engaged in that activity. So if you can be happy or completely unhappy while involved in a specific activity, the activity itself can't be what's creating your happiness or unhappiness. So the next thing, people tend to think that a situation creates happiness, right? Like let's say a mansion would make us happy. But let's investigate. So if mansion created, or buying a mansion, let's say, created happiness, it would create the same amount of happiness for everyone. That's the way cause and effect works, right? If it's the same exact house, it would create the same exact emotional effect on each person. But if somebody was moving from a big house into another big house, how would they feel? Okay, maybe a little excited about something new. Now imagine another person moving from like a shack or a small apartment to a big mansion. How would they feel? Ecstatic, so much joy, right? Or now imagine another person moving from an even bigger mansion in a place they liked more to this mansion. How would they feel? Disappointed. So if the same mansion, the same house, has a completely different emotional impact on each person, then the house, the situation itself, can't be what's creating the happiness. So now let's look at another example. It would seem as though someone proposing to us or asking us to marry them would create happiness, right? Getting married seems to create happiness. But if getting married created happiness, the factual situation of it or the factual event, then as long as we were married, we'd be happy. But yet, that's not the way it works. In the beginning, when we first find out about it, we're really happy, and then happiness comes and goes, and we have all different sorts of emotions. So if the happiness is created by the marriage, as long as we were married, we'd be happy. But yet that's not the case, is it? So now that we looked at what doesn't make us happy, let's now see what does make us happy. So there are, broadly speaking, two different ways to feel happiness. To have positive thoughts and to have an absence of thoughts. So first let's look at positive thoughts, some examples of it. So if you do well on an exam, afterwards you get to think, yay, I did well, I did great, I was successful, and those positive thoughts will make you happy. Or if you do well playing a sport, or if you get a promotion, afterwards you'd say, this is great, this is wonderful for my life, I'm so happy about it. Or if somebody asks us out, or if someone says they love us, then it gives us a positive thought. Somebody loves me. I am lovable. I am likable. And these positive thoughts make us happy. So that's one type. And the other type of happiness comes from an absence of thoughts, or a moment where you're not thinking. Right? And that happens in two different ways. One is when we're just distracted from our thoughts, and the other is when we lose specific thoughts. So I'll explain what both of those are. So being distracted from thoughts is what happens when we're engaging in an activity with our full attention. So if we're playing a sport and we're just so immersed in it that we're just there enjoying ourselves because we're not thinking about anything else. Right? We're not thinking about what we have to do, what we should be doing, what might happen. None of that. We're not thinking about whether we're good enough. We're so immersed in the activity at hand, we're just enjoying ourselves. So that can happen playing with our children, spending time with our partner, hanging out with friends, watching TV. When we're watching TV or a movie, we're getting distracted from our thoughts. When we're listening to music, we're getting distracted from our thoughts. That's why we enjoy this stuff, because it takes us away from all the thoughts that make us unhappy. So that's one type. And the other way to experience the happiness of not having thoughts is when we get something that we've wanted for a while. Okay, so to give you an example of this, if you are about to take a test, you have a test, or let's say a job interview actually. So you have a job interview coming up and you're so worried about it, you're so nervous, you're thinking it would be bad if you don't get it, you think your job isn't good enough right now. So all these thoughts are making you unhappy. Thinking it's not good enough makes you feel ashamed and lacking. Thinking it would be bad if you don't get the job makes you feel anxiety and tension. So in the moment, if you go to the interview and in the moment that they say you got the offer, you got the job, you're going to experience a real overwhelming happiness. And it may seem that it's created by the situation itself or by positive thoughts, but it's not. In that first moment, what you're feeling is relief in a sense, because you lost all the thoughts that were making you unhappy about your current job, and you lost all the thoughts that made you have anxiety and worry about the job interview and not getting the job. So let me give you another example. For most of us, we're taught that you should be in a relationship, you should get married, it's best to get married, it's best to have a family and have kids. Since we learn that, we inherently and unconsciously usually believe it's not good enough to be single. Right? It's bad to be single, it's bad that I'm not in a relationship, especially after you're in your mid-20s. So once you believe those thoughts, you feel lacking and insufficient. And then also you have this fear that it would be bad if I don't get married, right? And that creates anxiety and worry. And then in addition, you have all these thoughts about where is this the one or is this not the one when you meet a guy? And looking for the guy or looking for the girl. And then worrying about how you look to see if you're good enough for the one if you find them. Right? So in the moment that someone proposes to you, it seems like the proposal itself makes you happy. But it's not. In that moment, you don't have to fear getting whether someone will marry you. You don't have to feel insufficient anymore. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think about it. Nothing. In that moment, all those thoughts are gone. And boom, it's this overwhelming joy of just no thought. So those are the different types of happiness. Those are the things that make us happy, despite how it seems. And in the coming videos, I'm going to talk about the differences between those types of happiness and how to have fulfillment and that sort of thing. So I hope you enjoyed the video and you found it helpful, and I will see you on the next video.